when you look at your district is one of the wealthiest districts in America, but also has some of the poorest neighborhoods in America at the same time, right?
In time.
You got Eden Wall projects. You got, Scarsdale, right? You got Mount Vernon, and then you got Ardley, right? And it's actually a tale of America and how separate but so close within a couple of miles. You have some of the wealthiest places, and then you have the projects, right? And the wealthy people will never come to the projects, and the people in the projects probably will never be in the wealthy people's house ever, right? So talk about, and it's always these neighborhoods that are poor, Yonkers, South Yonkers, it's always Black people and Spanish people, Black and Latino people. They always permeate these neighborhoods. So talk about affordability, Black wealth creation, and what your agenda is to kind of bridge that.
Yeah, I want to start with the issue of affordable housing. So there's an affordable housing crisis across the country, and it's really manifested in Westchester County. We need about 80,000 units in the county. My opponent hasn't really done much about that, even though he's been county executive for a number of years. One of the challenges to providing truly affordable housing, so working class housing, or let's call it low income housing, right? Those who work full time, don't make much money, but need housing, need affordable housing at a rate, in terms of federal policy, 30% of salary. That's capped at 30% of salary towards housing. We just introduced a bill today that's capping, looking to cap rental costs at 20% of salary, to go even lower. But what happens is places like Scarsdale, places like Rye, the wealthier areas, they don't allow affordable housing to be built in their communities. They only want a certain type of culture, and this is a quote from them, to live in those communities. They don't want buildings, even if they're small buildings. They don't want multi-families. They want single family to maintain the culture that they have in those communities. But if we're going to really have affordable housing to meet the needs of everyone in the district, we should be building in those areas as well. So that's a key important point. Another point is the fact that the reason why we don't have more affordable housing is because the housing stock is low, and it's low by design from Wall Street to keep prices up. We believe housing is a fundamental human right. And if you pay taxes and you live in America, a wealthy nation, you should be able to have affordable, dignified housing. As you know, childcare also isn't affordable for the working class. Utilities are crazy. Food is crazy. Transportation, it's hard to, people are just working to survive right now. So there's a couple ways to handle that. One is making sure corporations and the wealthy pay their fair share. We're not saying take all their money in taxes, but they should be paying a little more so that we could build more affordable housing and deal with utilities and all of that. Right now, that's not happening. The other part of it, Black wealth building, is not just about financial literacy. It's also about public investments in repairing the harms that have happened historically in America. And so reparations is about responding to redlining. Redlining is when our communities were isolated and devalued simply because they were Black. We need to now reinvest federal dollars in those areas to rebuild those areas and allow them to begin a bootstrapping system of building wealth within their own neighborhoods. The federal government has subsidized building white wealth since the beginning of America. It's never done that for Black people. So that needs to happen. That's what reparations is all about. And then finally, the issue of entrepreneurship is really, really key. But the issue of entrepreneurship around new ideas is really, really key as well. And so financial literacy is what we need and all of that, proper investments. But we need new ideas. We need to build and design new products and services that America and the world needs to help us build wealth. Similar to this apparatus we're working on now, both the hardware and the software that we're using has built wealth for individuals and groups. we need to do the same thing as well. And to me, the pathway to that is technology. And because technology to me is still in its infant stage, is still like a gold rush type of space. But this is why I advocate so much for STEM education in our schools, because we got brilliant kids, but we got to make sure they're thinking on an entrepreneurship level, not just a worker level.
I agree with you. I want to talk about a population that obviously is near and dear to all of us. That is kind of the crown jewel of most communities, and that's our women and our children. So you spoke about financial literacy. I know both you and I come from an educational background, but we don't talk about women's issues enough. Whether that be, and I know from a general election that's going to be a heavy topic, and from a local and state election, I'm assuming that it'll be just as important. So when we talk about reproductive rights, we talk about gender bias, we talk about maternity leave, all these issues. How are we combating that from the state level, from your perspective?
The state is doing pretty well with reproductive justice overall. If a woman chooses to seek an abortion in our state, she has the pathway to do that without being criminalized or targeted or whatever. So reproductive rights in the state are pretty strong. Where we are not strong is maternal mortality. And what happens with maternal mortality overall, and also maternal mortality with Black women. Like, Black women die of childbirth in New York State at a rate that's incredibly high. Like, the country, across the country, is very high, but in New York State, it's incredibly high. And that's a major problem, because we still have racism and racist practices within our healthcare system overall. The way Black women are treated, their so-called tolerance to pain, their relationships with OBGYNs, the lack of birth workers, the lack of midwives when Black women are seeking to have a child is a real problem. And then the overall medical field and the lack of bias and racial anti-racist training from doctors and nurses and OBGYNs is really critical to this. And so, our healthcare system has a history of racism, from Henrietta Lacks to the Tuskegee experiment, to the what's the term? I'm forgetting the term now. The sterilization of Black and brown women in our country. There's a horrible history with the healthcare system. And there still is now, which is why a lot of us don't even seek healthcare, right? And so, the state has to do way more in terms of anti-racist training and funding to deal with the issue of infant mortality, maternal morbidity. That's a big issue.